Hello, this is your host, Belle Chavey speaking. Welcome to today's episode of the Morrison Family Center for Student Wellbeing's podcast, WellCat 101. The purpose of this podcast is to give students an opportunity to share their college experiences, their advice, or interesting anecdotes for listeners who are students, staff, parents, etc. Each episode topic will be related to student well-being and or mental health through the lens of positivity and growth. We hope you enjoy this episode of WellCat 101. Hello, everyone, and welcome to WellCat 101. I am so excited to be back in the office with everyone, all my coworkers. I love them dearly, and especially our therapy dog, Oakley, who hangs out quite a bit in here now. You can come and see him during his office hours in the Morrison Family Center office, third floor of the Union, from 1 to 3 p.m. on Tuesdays and 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. on Fridays. Those are his typical office hours. You might be able to catch him in the office more than that, but those are when he is pretty much guaranteed to be there. He will definitely be there during his office hours and ready to hang out with friends. So that's really exciting that we have him here most of the time now. Speaking of friends and coworkers, I am so excited to welcome a member of our very own leadership team here at the Morrison Family Center, Kim Ybarra. Kim, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Would you like to introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about you.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks so much. So yes, my name's Kim. I joined the Morrison Family Center for Student Wellbeing in November as the prevention coordinator. And so my job every single day is to come on in and tackle some of the challenges that students are facing with the students, kind of get my boots on the ground and learn a little bit more about how well-being is showing up on the day-to-day and what we can do to kind of enhance some of those activities and those opportunities for education, both inside the classroom, inside like the residence halls, but also just in your day-to-day interactions. So I've been here for about 2.5 months, almost 3 months, and I'm just really excited to get going.
Yeah. Are you liking it here? You have a good time?
Yes. I mean, it's hard when Oakley's around to not have a good day. But like you said, all of our coworkers and everybody, the students and our faculty and staff that interact with our center is just, it's such a rewarding part of the work to know that we're all very mission driven and in our own unique way, we're really like making difference. That's awesome.
Yeah, definitely. Now, like always, before we get into today's episode topic, we have a fun little icebreaker to begin our episode. And of course, in the spirit of Valentine's Day, I had to theme our intro question. So today's question is, spend Valentine's Day out or spend Valentine's Day in?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I guess it depends on where you're at and where we're going out. But my first answer is in. Like, make it a staycation, make it a special night in. And so I don't know. I mean, I'm a crafty kind of person, and I love kind of like cooking and my gifts, random gifts of service and things like that is one of my love languages. And so I really think that to take the opportunity to bring the outside world into wherever you are, Galentine's Day, friends, intimate partners, whoever it might be, even like your parents or your pet. I think it's just a good opportunity to show love. And why not bring that inside?
Yeah, I actually am going to agree with you on that one. Like in theory, Valentine's Day out sounds fun. Sure. And this year, a Galentine's Day is so my jam. And that's kind of what me and my roommates, my best friends are planning. And we had this discussion of like, well, should we go somewhere? Should we not? And I do think that in is more fun because, like you said, you get to kind of bring your favorite things inside and you don't have to like make a reservation somewhere. But I think that inside can still be special, like still dress up, still have fun. I know that Chick-fil-A does like a Valentine's Day charcuterie board. That's
really?
What apparently people have been telling me. And so that's apparently what we're going to do for Valentine's Day.
Fun.
However, I do know that I think me and Addie are going to go see the Wuthering Heights movie on Valentine's Day, since Valentine's Day is on a Saturday and we won't have school. So I guess maybe that counts as going out.
A little bit of both.
Yeah, a little bit of both. But I don't know. Watching a movie at home also sounds really fun. So maybe we'll do that instead. But the new Wuthering Heights movie it's kind of tempting us. We can't resist. So Galentine's, yeah. All right, now to jump into today's topic, healthy relationships and consent. We're going to be diving into what consent and boundaries are, how they work, how they can operate in healthy and unhealthy ways, just different things like that. And Kim, you do a presentation about this.
Yeah.
So that's why I wanted to have you as a guest. And I don't really have any questions prepared other than whatever comes up when you kind of share your knowledge with us.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and like I said, before I was able to accept the role in November, I've been able to interact with college students for a number of years. I mean, my college years are behind me, but I've always been really passionate about kind of collective impact and creating positive social environments in a way. I'm a leadership nerd at heart, and so I really kind of took it serious when folks were like, leave this place better than when you came. And so I have a real mission-driven sort of approach to the work that I do. And so that's why this job is perfect for me in a lot of different ways. And thinking about the conversation about safe and healthy relationships and some of the components that are involved in that, like consent and boundary making and things like that, I'm realizing as I get a little further away from my college years that having those really transformative conversations and opportunities to practice some of this stuff would have been really, really helpful, right, in my 20s and 30s and things like that. Because no matter how many times you practice, like you're never an expert. We're all just trying to do our very best out here. We hold relationship with so many people throughout our lifetime and in a variety of different ways. And so I think it's probably a really good thing for us to take an internal audit of what matters most to ourselves, maybe think back through our lived histories and recognize that, the environments that we came from will influence and impact the environments we are going into. And so this college age is just a perfect time to start framing kind of what it is that we see as normal, what we would like normal to be, and kind of what is our part to play in that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah, a lot of times people, I like to ask folks when we first start out to think about maybe 3 important relationships that you have in your life and what makes that relationship meaningful. So I guess if I asked you, if you could name off maybe 2 or 3 relationships that you hold in your life today, what would those relationships be and what makes them meaningful to you?
Ooh, okay. Oh, this is fun. Wait, you're asking me questions now. Okay. I have a college-age brother who also goes to K-State. Shout out Brigham. And I have a sibling relationship with him and a familial relationship. And then I have one with my long-distance best friend that is very different. She goes to a different college, but we've been friends since we were teenagers.
Okay.
And then I have friendship relationships with all 3 of my roommates, which is different than it's like similar to familial because we live together, but they are my friends.
Yeah, that's great. And what makes those relationships meaningful, or what makes them matter to you?
I think being there for each other when times are hard. I think when I want to push people away for the wrong reasons. And what I mean by that, I guess, is, everybody needs alone time and everyone needs solace. But I think sometimes isolation, I tend to think I can just handle things by myself. And they reach out to me and are able to kind of crack open my shield against the outside world when I really need it. And being able to have just good conversations, being able to laugh. That's what I think makes them meaningful. And of course, having fun with them. That goes along with like laughter and just, I guess like emotional intimacy probably.
Yeah, I think you hit it right on the nail with that. A lot of times it's the time we spent with each other. Folks talk all the time about the history between us or getting through those challenging times, being able to celebrate the good times as well. Of course, the memories, right? Like, what makes things meaningful, what makes things matter is how we invest our time and our energy into it. And so humans, just by nature, we're communal. We want to have relationship. And when we're challenged in any way in that space, it makes life a little difficult. It makes it hard. That you spoke to isolation a little bit. I myself struggle with the extrovert syndrome of go, 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 go. And then why am I just crashing after 5 days straight of giving and giving and giving? And I'm realizing, the relationship with myself isn't quite as balanced as it might need to be there. So we're all learning together. We're getting through it. But yeah, it's important to kind of think about that positionality in a relationship and who we allow into our sphere and how we make meaning with those folks. And so if a relationship is just basically a state of being connected, associated, or bonded with another person, then of course we can think through the many multitudes and the layers of relationship we hold. So, I mean, I wouldn't immediately think, except for this week we got our water heater replaced, that I have a relationship with my landlord. But if you looked at my text messages today, you would see some
there you go,
intimate conversation about some things. And so our landlords, we have a relationship with. I'm sure many college students listening have maybe a love, maybe not so love-hate relationship with their landlord, right? Our roommates, our classmates, teachers and faculty members, mentors. In this college period, it's so important that we build and maintain some brand new types of relationships. And so, of course, we're going to stumble across new boundaries and new moments of consenting into accepting whatever it is that we're working through. And so when we talk about what it means to be in a safe and healthy relationship, I think the number one aha in that space is we recognize that there are power dynamics that differentiate across different types of relationships. And if those power dynamics are a little out of whack, or they're a little funky, or they're moving and changing from what they used to be or what you want them to be, it's probably time we talk about how safe or healthy our relationship with that person might be. So I think it was a pretty good explanation in the way that you shared your three most meaningful relationships. And that you mentioned your roommates are your friends. They're also like your live-in almost family mates while you're here. We talk about all the connections we have in regards to relationship, and those things can change. A lot of times, trust and respect and communication, those kind of tenets, those foundational pieces, they apply across all types of relationships. So,
yeah, I mean, you're thinking about power dynamics. I took a communication and conflict class over the winter break as like a winter intersession, and we definitely talked about that. Reminded me of in theater when we have our meetings before productions begin, we usually nominate someone in the cast to be like we call it the equity deputy, but basically the person that is the liaison of communication between the stage manager and the actor, or the director and the actor, or the assistant director and the actor, and how that is like the actor's voice, because stage managers are a power dynamic level above the actors, and then the director is a power dynamic above the stage manager. And so when you interact with terraced power dynamics that are in a very set system, it is important to have like those checks and balances in things. And so that's what power dynamics make me think about most of the time. But when they're not as structured as that, they're kind of hard to identify in interpersonal relationships where it's your friends.
Right. Absolutely. I think the university environment kind of outlines some really awesome ways to practice seeing some of those layers and dynamics. I'm thinking about our graduate students who are maybe like TAs or GTAs in classes, and then the access to our faculty members directly. I'm thinking about in student organizations like fraternities and sororities, where there's sort of a hierarchy and a rank of like seniority and things like this. I'm sure our athletic groups are similar as well. And so there are a lot of ways that the design of our relationships might signal where those power dynamics exist. And then there are a lot of opportunities in the collective impact. This university is for everyone. This experience of college is available and accessible for everyone, as it should be. And so I think we have some really unique opportunities to be allies and advocates for folks who might not be quite as centered or available. And I think another part that this brings up in my mind is the fact that obviously communication is at the center of all of this. And cultural and contextual differences matter in communicating. I mean, all the time. I don't know if what you say to your parents is heard or understood just the same as it is to maybe your siblings. So generationally, there are differences. And we're at an R1 institution with a massive footprint. Like, we have folks from all over the place in our community with a variety of experiences and perspectives. I think it's really important to recognize that our verbal and our nonverbal and our written communication takes practice. It's not something we're born knowing. And so thinking about times in your relationship with others where even the best intended communication has kind of maybe gone off the rails or gone wrong. And then maybe thinking about the role that silence, lack of communicating, sometimes plays in that game of equality and respect and understanding each other. So lots to talk about in that world of things. But I guess just the main takeaway being that communication is key and that it does take practice. Can you think back to a time where you maybe weren't as refined in communicating with somebody, but you've worked on it and you feel maybe a little bit better?
Yeah.
Better prepared for the next time you might need to speak on something? Yeah.
Definitely.
It takes practice.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so I think a lot of times the verbal stuff is a little easier. In relationship with folks, if you want to know something or you want something to be known, say it, speak on it. In theory, that's easy, but the gray area of any relationship, any experience will tell you that a lot of us spend some time in our brain thinking, is that what they really meant? Did they say what they meant? Did I miss something? Did I say that right? Should I say something? Like, there's so much time and energy spent in how to communicate. And that's just on the verbal side of things. The nonverbal side of stuff, like, I don't know if somebody has ever told you to fix your face in a heated conversation, or if maybe you remember a time when somebody was trying to confront you about X, Y, or Z, and you noticed without missing a beat the nonverbal communication that was going on, despite the words coming out of their mouth, and maybe there was a disconnect. And so I think we catch ourselves and others in this, wait a second, what you're saying and what you're meaning might not quite be adding up. Or what I'm led to believe isn't exactly followed by what you're saying. And so we're getting into the red flag territory of some things when this becomes more of a pattern. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like what you mentioned about communication can be used in healthy and unhealthy ways, and not like silence and no communication. Brings me back to obviously power dynamics things, but like talking about things like power currencies, like every single person has some sort of power, and other people have power currencies as well. Like your friendships, like the reason you're friends with them is because their power currency over you is their like emotional warmth and their friendship. Whereas like a teacher or a mentor, their power currency over you is like they are your mentor. They have power over your grades, or like your parents have power over your, they control you, maybe your car or how much money they give you and things like that, especially if you're still like a high schooler. Mm-hmm. And so people can use those as like communication tools, or they can use them in not so healthy ways. And then that's where those red flags show up.
Exactly. Well, because I think it's fair to say that miscommunication happens, disagreements happen. It might be a red flag if we only agree all the time. Like, there might be a reality check
that actually
somewhere.
Isn't great either.
Yeah, there's a space where we need to ask some questions there too. But it is common for disagreements and conflict to exist. We're human and we're messy, all of us. And the idea that we never fight is probably not a healthy sign, right? And so it is important to recognize that when disagreements happen, we want to stick to the topic at hand. We want to do our very best to maintain a gentle and calm voice and to use respectful language. I think somebody's grandma sometimes said, you catch more flies with honey. And so ideally the people or the person that you are in a relationship with is meant to be your best friend, your teammate, your person. You want to solve this challenge, this problem, this concern together. They are not the concern, right? And so we want to avoid aggressive and intimidating gestures, and we want to listen and wait to speak. You know, the we listen and we don't judge kind of moment. Helpful card to pull out every once in a while, right?
Yeah.
Be clear and direct. Use I statements. Take time to cool down and always be willing to apologize or compromise. Now, these things take a long time to build, practice, to feel confident or competent in doing. Nobody gets a gold star when you do these things. It's just you likely avoid some headaches and some hardships, right? And so it's really important that we remember that healthy communication isn't something we're born with. It's something that we practice. And so learning how to fight fair is important. Understanding our own emotional intelligence when we're approaching a confrontation or a fight. Conflict isn't unhealthy, right? Avoidance can be the red flag that we were talking about. And so I like to say that healthy relationships, they're not conflict free, but they're repair capable. So if you're in a space, in a place where you're like, I want to work on this, it might take a little bit for our counterpart to say, you know what, I want to work on this too. We check our emotions, we check our heart space, and we say, you know what, I'm ready for repair. If you're in a spot where you think and you know and you can confirm we're repair capable, we got something to work with. But if we're toying with like, I don't know how to exist and I'm not sure what I can do and this conflict just keeps showing up and I don't think we can repair this, that's okay, but that's a different conversation, right?
Yeah.
So it's hard. It's hard to know. And it's important that when you're in that chapter of like, oh my gosh, what's next? You are a part of a massive community. You are surrounded by support and resources, just like the Morrison Family Center for Student Wellbeing and a bunch of other folks here at K-State. And so lots of doors are open to anyone in that situation if they are just wondering, what can I even do next?
And those resources will be plugged in the description.
Exactly. So remember, healthy relationships aren't conflict free; they're repair capable. And how do we repair stuff when things get a little bit off track, or how do we kind of prepare ahead of time so that maybe we don't cause harm to repair in that sense? That's where the consent and the boundaries piece really comes in. And so. I like to think about boundaries as like my rules. It's like my limits regarding my space, my emotions, my privacy. We can talk a little bit about the different types of boundaries that folks might hold. It's really a clear limit on how we want people to behave towards us. A boundary is set for you. You set your boundary, and it's for you. It took me a couple years to really understand and realize that. It's an essential part of healthy relationships. Think about boundaries when you were growing up in your house. If you were lucky enough to share a house with siblings, and maybe you shared one bathroom with the entire household, right? There are boundaries that became very abundantly clear, whether it was time, physical space, all sorts of different things. How we got to know those boundaries, might have been a little clunky, might have been really smooth. There may be some success stories we can borrow from some friends and other experiences too, but it's important to know that if an activity or a person's action makes you feel unsafe or uncomfortable, it is okay for you to set a boundary there. It has to be something internal that you recognize is needed for you, for your safety, for your support, for your success. And so it is kind of an act of courage to set a boundary, but it's so important to separate your needs and wants and your feelings of what's going on from that of those around you.
Yeah, I think I just keep talking about theater because we use a lot of this language regarding boundaries because there's a lot of physical contact with other people, whether that is actually physically touching them or whether it's like fight choreography or something else. Like we are just in space with other people. And one of the analogies that really helped me that was explained to me because I used to really struggle with setting boundaries because I was so afraid of hurting people's feelings. And maybe this analogy is in your presentation, but maybe it's not. think of it as like a fence around your house. Like if you're neighbors with someone and your neighbor has a fence around their house, that fence was there before you got there. That fence was put up not because of you. And that fence is keeping their house safe. And it's not because they don't like you. It's not because your neighbor wants to keep you out and doesn't want you ever to even get near their fence. It's just that neighbor has a fence and it doesn't really have anything to do with you. And the boundary is kind of the same way. So when you're setting a boundary, most of the time that boundary probably doesn't have much to do with the other person. Maybe it does, but either way, you can totally set up a fence. And it doesn't mean that like you're hurting the other person's feelings, because your feelings aren't hurt when your neighbor has a fence around their yard.
Right.
And so metaphorically, why would you be offended when, somebody else is like, oh, hey, this boundary is here and it is not personal.
Yeah. That individual may need to reflect on their positionality towards fences.
Yeah, true. Yeah, if you have like a really intense like beef with fences,
yeah.
I mean that analogy maybe is not for you, but like
exactly. No, I think that's great. I think something that's important to reflect on in whatever situation you are in is, especially with boundaries, whether most of the time we recognize and realize, oh, shoot, I probably needed a boundary there well after things are a little frazzly, a little hot button, right? Stuff is going on. And so if we were able to pause and take reflection for a moment to think through and start defining where boundaries might be needed in our life, the questions I would maybe like simmer on and think through would be something like, what's causing me stress or discomfort right now? What do I dread each day? Who or what drains me? Who or what makes me feel unsafe, supported, or devalued? Okay, and I think about these things and I just kind of write them down on a list or on a page. I also think about who or what gives me energy. Who or what makes me feel safe, supported, and valued? And what do I look forward to each day? So just sort of like priming our brain to think about kind of where are our boundaries, big picture. Where are we getting kind of tripped up, triggered out, right? Like what's going on there? So as we're kind of simmering in that space, and at this point, I would have maybe our listeners, feel free to play along if you want, draw a big old circle on your page. Just draw a big circle in the center of your page, and on the inside of that circle, we're going to write down everything that makes us feel safe and stress-free. So some examples might be hugs from a loved one. Oh, how about Oakley coming to visit you right in the morning, right? Walks in nature, that's my favorite. Having a daily routine, time to pursue hobbies. A little more seriously, how about just the concept and principle of bodily autonomy? Clear communication from my parents or my boss. Things like that, right? And so the things that make you feel safe or stress-free, when these things are existing in your world, these are the things that make you feel safe and stress-free. A fully charged phone, $200 extra on payday Friday, right? Something.
Heck yeah.
And then outside of the circle, this is the last part of that activity, would be outside of that circle, we're going to write down anything that makes you feel stressed, uncomfortable, or unsafe. Because these are the people or situations that are pushing your boundaries. This is the spot where we want to create new action. This is where we need further attention, okay? And so outside of that circle, it might be colleagues gossiping at work, or your roommate using your stuff or eating your food without asking. Not being able to go to the gym because you have to work late. Maybe your partner is checking in on your phone calls and text messages. Or your sister is only calling you when she has a crisis. Only reaches out when you have a problem. Things like that, right? Your friend asking to borrow money. Constantly wanting to borrow money, maybe never paying you back. Things like that, right? Situations and boundaries that you've noticed in your life or in your semester, in your year so far at K-State, that really feel like they're pushing the boundaries of what would work for you. Mm-hmm. And so that just gives you a chance to kind of do an audit or assess a little bit about kind of the things, the hot button topics that you are facing in your life every day, maybe at the beginning of the semester, And you're kind of just taking stock of where things are, what the things are on the inside of that circle that can really help support you, that you can look to and maybe look to model and gain more of. And then you look outside that circle and you see kind of the things that are adding to that stress and making you uncomfortable, and in some cases maybe unsafe. And so these are the opportunities to create some change there, and really learn to practice some of those boundaries.
I feel like that would be such a good, I don't want to say grounding exercise, but that would be something like if you I feel like I need to do that when I'm like, feel like things are out of control with my life, or like there are frequent times when I feel overwhelmed by school or stress that I just genuinely feel like there's nothing that I can do about my situation. There are so many pressing things and there's not a single thing I can change about it. But then I've never done that exercise before, but I'm going to use that next time and be like, okay, let me just take a moment to look at what I have and then figure out what I can do.
Yeah. I mean, and ideally, right, we all are cool and we have the time out and we're ready to just be like, I need a minute. I'm a little overwhelmed. But, when life is happening, it's what? Just wait. It's just a mess. It's just, it's overwhelming and it's a lot. And grace in this place goes a long, long way. So, yeah, I mean, I think it is important to think about boundaries. There's a lot of times in my teenage years, and maybe our listeners can remember some arguments, mother to daughter and things like that about boundaries and wanting to be in my business or needing to know where I was going. Maybe we remember our first summer home after going away to college and the trying to keep track of where you're at and what friends you're with and how late are you going to stay out like you haven't been gone for 9 months of the previous year, right? Like there are all sorts of transitions that are happening for everybody in the relationship. And it's just important that we return to that conversation about setting boundaries or maybe amending boundaries, because they're not meant to be, cement brick walls. You mentioned the fence, right? It's not a brick wall, it's a fence. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's just a little rope, right? Yeah. And so I like that analogy, and we can run with that in a couple of different ways, because if the boundaries are our rules kind of regarding our limits, then consent is our agreeables. Hopefully our active, sober, and enthusiastic agreeables, right? Mm-hmm. Seeking consent is one of the most important elements of any healthy relationship. And it really hinges on clear and open communication about boundaries and about safety, desires, needs, feelings, emotions, the things that really make up an important relationship. Consent is one of those things that's ongoing. It's never just one and done. It's not a box that we check ever. It's one of those conversations that happen between people every single time we get a chance to touch on it. It's actually a really nice way to affirm in a healthy relationship what's going well. We love to hear yes, right? We love to hear, yep, that's right. Yep, that's right. But what's really great is a hell yes, right? We love an enthusiastic yes. And so it's really important to know that consent is ongoing and that it applies much further beyond intimate moments and sex. But consent is a conversation. It's not just a checkbox. And it's necessary in any interaction when you're engaging with another person's body, with their space, with their property, with their likeness. And I know we don't got enough time to talk about Snapchat and Yik Yak and all the other things.
That's another episode.
But the digital world and consent and boundaries and relationship, we could definitely talk about again. So it's just one of those things where I would invite our listeners to stretch our familiarity and comfortability of consent as a part of an intimate relationship and start looking at consent across the board. We teach little kids all the time, right? We talk about you don't have to hug grandpa if you don't want to hug grandpa. I think we are in a much different place socially, maybe just generally in society in some places where we're having these conversations at a younger age and a little bit more holistically. That consent is not gained through emotional manipulation or harassment or force, right? We're not lying to people. We're not gaslighting and pleading or threatening them. We're not going to use unsolicited photos or unwanted texts and calls and gifts, right? We're not going to be stalking people or unwantingly touching people through harassment and force. We're not doing those things. That's not consensual. That's not willing. That's not informed and enthusiastically yes. None of that is. And so we know when consent is going well, and we have an idea when consent is not going well. And it's important to remember that silence is not consent either. A person cannot consent if they're impaired, if they're incapable, if they are intoxicated, passed out. Silence, the absence of a no, is not a yes. Coercion and all of that invalidates consent as well. We talked about power dynamics at the beginning. And again, if consent is consistently ongoing, and it is one of those things that brings a couple together, or two partners, two people in relationship together, I want to know that you want to go out to dinner with me on Friday because it's Galentine's Day. I'm not going to force you to come with me, and it wouldn't be a very healthy friendship if those expectations were playing games in our emotional manipulation. Surely wouldn't it be great if I'm harassing you 4 nights out of next week, telling you, I'll see you at dinner, I'll see you at dinner, I'll see you at dinner, right? Like, that doesn't feel good.
No.
That's not a healthy relationship.
And that's not very fun for either person, because when you feel like you're forcing someone to do something, that's not fun either. You know what I mean? So yeah, consent is way more fun.
It really is. It really is. Yes is great. Green lights, right? Green means go, but hell yes is just a little nicer to hear. And it's just, it takes all of the guessing out of it. And it makes everyone in the situation feel like we're on board and we're ready to see what the next adventure might be. You can retract, you can change your mind. And those safe and respectful interactions that occur when boundaries and consent come together, that's the sweet stuff. That is the stuff that like Lifetime movies are made out of. That is the good stuff. And so when we think about the effective ways to create and maintain healthy relationships, we need to start with ourselves. We think about the things that we kind of concede to, that we maybe go along with but aren't actively and enthusiastically consenting to, right? I think about biochem as a sociology major. Like, I need to get through it, and I consented to take it. I did not so much enjoy it, but I had to find a way to accept what I wanted out of that. I think when you learn to develop a healthy relationship with yourself, and you learn your boundaries, and you learn how to speak for what you need, the interaction of gaining and receiving consent becomes much more natural.
Yeah, and I think that I like that you said about consent being enthusiastic, and that coercion invalidates consent, because and consent is always retractable too. Like, especially if someone maybe consents to something at first and then maybe doesn't realize what they are consenting to, or what they have consented to, which is why, because consent is retractable, at least using consent in a healthy way, and then it means that, maybe they're in an intimate emotional setting, or an intimate physical setting, or even in friendships. Like, maybe you agreed to go to this Galentine's Day, but then you realized that 7 other people were going to be there, and they were going to be in a super packed restaurant, and it was going to be like $120 per person.
Yeah.
You didn't maybe understand that it was going to be so expensive, so loud and overwhelming when you first consented to Galentine's. And so then it absolutely is fine to be like, no. Right.
That's a lovely example, because the people pleaser in me would be like, okay, I guess I'm going to go. And then I'll go. And then that next morning I'll wake up and I'll be like, so mad at myself. What am I going to do? I just spent all that money. I can't do XYZ, right? I would feel like I betrayed myself. I would internalize the lack of consent that I gave myself. And so there are so many different examples of that in the day-to-day of our own, whether it's self-destruction or learning how to get out of our own way, or choosing different patterns and behaviors. You challenge yourself to grow and become something better than where you started, all of those things. And yeah, it takes some time. But I do think one of the easiest ways to remember, like, what is consent, a lot of people like to use this fries category. So consent is like fries, right? Mm-hmm. And maybe we'll work with Chick-fil-A to somehow incentivize free fries or something. But so if consent is fries, I'm just going to go ahead and break that down. Fries means consent is freely given and reversible and informed and enthusiastic and specific. So consent is fries, okay? If somebody is 2 Fats fish bowls in, consent cannot be given, right? Mm-hmm. Freely given, reversible, informed, enthusiastic, and specific, okay? Just because an action was okay the first time does not mean consent should be expected in the future, nor does saying yes to one thing imply that you're okay with other things, right? It's very specific. It's informed. To your point, if you didn't know that was a $120 dinner and the factors of that situation had changed from when you were first invited, you were unable to consent to the reality of what that was. You didn't consent there, that your consent was invalidated, right? Things like that. And so consent can be revoked at any time. Consent is our agreeables, right? That's what we are agreeing on. And so if any part of that party is changing their mind or have come to a different boundary, then in the best case scenario, we would say, thank you for letting me know. Thank you for sharing. I hear you and I respect you. I will accept this, right? Mm-hmm. We all have our choices to make.
And we do that in little ways all the time where, like, I know at least if I am inviting my friends over to something and then plans change and maybe there's going to be more people there than expected, I like to let them know and be like, oh, hey, instead of this party of 5 people, it's actually going to be a party of 20 people. You know, is that okay? Totally cool if this changes things, and understanding that in that context, and that can be applied to many other situations, mm-hmm. that if circumstances change after someone has already given consent to something, you should be open to the fact that they could change their mind and that it's 100% okay for them to change their mind. You shouldn't feel betrayed if someone finds out something later that then maybe changes the way that they have consented to something.
Right, exactly. I mean, I think a lot of times asking for consent can be awkward. It can feel awkward in a way. It's a little socially charged and like we shouldn't have to talk about this, but we better kind of thing. But what if we flip that on its head and like opening up that conversation to decrease the awkward feeling, right, of seeking consent? Like if we were able to just normalize questions like, hey, is this comfortable for you? Or how would you feel about trying this? Like we're thinking about this in intimate spaces. Or maybe not. How would you like to try some Brussels sprouts instead of being like, here, Belle, eat the Brussels sprouts.
Yeah,
right?
like, oh my gosh, we all got Brussels sprouts for the table. Like just assuming that everybody is fine with that.
And then forcing people to eat them because you bought them for them. Like that's weird.
Mm-hmm. And that can be used as a metaphor for other things.
Right. So you think about like non-intimate things in ways that we can ask for consent. Hey, can I borrow your necklace tonight? Like, I love that necklace. Can I borrow it? Is it okay if I show you this video? There's a lot going on social media these days. And I have learned it is so kind to ask the person I want to go and just vent to or, you know, shock drop whatever came across my Facebook feed or whatever. Just ask them, are you in a place where I can vent about this? Is it okay if I show you this? They're already getting bombarded with the videos and all the things. Like, why would we try to create more harm in that sense? Like, unintentionally. But let's ask for consent, right? Let's ask for that. Hey, is it okay if I invite another friend out with us? Those kind of things. Instead of just doing it and assuming your friends are going to go along with it. Like, if you can find ways to ask for consent in your friendships, if you can find ways to look at consent in your working relationships, in your familial spaces, then all of a sudden it's going to feel a little less heavy and a little less awkward in your intimate spaces as well.
Yeah. One of my favorite ways to practice consent and input it into my daily life is with, I have a private spam Instagram account where I like to post fun pictures that are not formal looking at all. And they're just for, my friends that follow me. And I like to post, funny pictures of my friends that I take of them. But I always ask before I'm about to post a picture that
so nice.
Maybe is not the most flattering. I do ask because I would want them to ask me. Mm-hmm. 9 times out of 10, they will say yes. And it's not a super awkward conversation. It's just like haha, look at this. Can I post this? But there have been a couple of times when they're like, oh my, that picture is so bad that I don't even think it would break the internet. I don't even think. And there's been some times when my friends have asked me and I'm like, guys, I know it's a funny photo and we can put it in our private group chat, but man, that cannot, Facebook or Instagram cannot see that.
Yeah, please.
Please, it would break the internet.
That's so funny.
And so that's just, I don't know, a tiny way that I remember to not just assume that people are okay with things being posted to them, even if in the even if we were laughing about it, or even if we, even if I know that my friend thinks it's funny that this photo was taken of her, I still am like, I better ask.
Yeah, that's very kind. I hope that follows you through your life. That's very nice. Yeah. I know that setting and reinforcing boundaries and talking about consent and stuff like this, it can be difficult, right? There are ways that practicing both can help improve not only the health of your relationships, but the quality of your own life and well-being. And so when we think about improved self-esteem and confidence and sense of identity and feelings of peace and security and safety, things like that you were just sharing, encouraging healthy communication and meaningful connection while also avoiding involvement in unnecessary drama. If we could do some of this stuff earlier on, we could avoid a whole lot of things as far as drama and conflict.
Oh yeah, even with the picture thing. Say I forget to ask or don't think to ask because it'll surely be fine if this funny picture of my friends on the internet, and then all of a sudden the friend is mad at you because you didn't ask me, and then they maybe tell other friends Belle posts things of people all the time and she just doesn't, you know what I mean? She's out for it. And then obviously I don't think my friends would do that, but that is just one example of ways that, I don't know, consent is clarifying. It's clarity, it's peace of mind.
Mm-hmm. It's confidence. Which can be so cool. I also think that most of my less than good day moments happen when my boundaries have been violated or when I've allowed a lack of the work I need to do internally to create and exist a boundary. That's where the most pain occurs, right? It's this challenge and expectation, self-inflicted or otherwise. And knowing that having the structure to uphold the confidence would be transformative in whatever that circumstance might be. And so it's really, you get to a point where you're just red hot remembering that no one's entitled to your body. No one's entitled to your space or your time or your possessions or your emotional energy. And logically that it's healthy to set boundaries and to practice consent and to expect others to respect your needs and wishes. And when you come into a room, when you come into your life with that as a baseline standard, people will respond accordingly. And so it's a long, hard road of self-work, self-respect, self-love. The longest and most important relationship you're ever going to have is going to be with yourself. And so that's the best place to start with these conversations about boundaries and about consent. And then I would say kind of ripple effect, roll that out to your friends. Roll that out to your roommates. Roll that out to the people you spend the most time with here at K-State, whether that's in your social clubs, your organizations, maybe your classes, maybe your Bible study, wherever it is. And just start really trying to actualize what it would look and feel like to champion things like setting boundaries and creating consent in your relationships.
Yeah. I love what you said about confidence, and I love it is hard. Like we sit here and we say all of these things that you should do or you could do as if they are easy. But the truth is that setting boundaries is hard, and it may, different days and different ways that you uphold your boundaries may change.
Mm-hmm.
And even depending on like your confidence level of that day. And, violation of boundaries can be really serious and they can be really damaging. I mean, there are circumstances when boundaries are violated in really extreme ways that it can really hurt you. And there are resources like CARES and the Morrison Family Center and lots of resources on campus for you if there are ways that your boundaries have been compromised. Mm-hmm. But even just little things like if you this happened to me when I was living with my family. When you have leftovers in the fridge, I have 2 brothers, and so leftovers are precious, but you got to put your name all over that thing. And all day I was looking forward to eating this really good Mexican food leftovers that we had in my fridge. And I literally, it was what I had been dreaming about all day. And I get home and someone has eaten it. And it was accidental. It wasn't intentional. But I was like, you all knew that this was what I had, and you just assumed that it was fine, that you could have it, but I never said that, and you never asked. Mm-hmm. And so I feel like that could happen with a roommate situation too. And I don't know, a way to remedy that would be to be like, hey, can we suggest maybe, I know my roommates, we have a pantry of stuff that like we'll buy for the whole house that's maybe not single serve, but like when I buy chocolate or specific like chips for myself, we have little totes in a cabinet, and each one of us has a little tote that if those things are in there, that means that those things are ours. And you can totally ask to have some, but you have to ask. Yeah. And so even just doing little things like that can be hard, but then you put that system in place. Mm-hmm. So then upholding it is really easy.
Yeah. And adjusting it would be easier because you're used to seeing a system in action. You're not starting from scratch. Mm-hmm. You know that in a shared living environment, there will be at least a conversation about expectations of other people's food, right?
Yeah.
That's great. And I think that transfers and translates in many other places as you grow up into, society and things like that. So yeah, I definitely think that we probably know a little bit more than we give ourselves credit for in this chapter of things. I think we're at an interesting place where knowing what we know is good, but knowing what we don't know is also a huge strength. And so leaning into being curious and building confidence with whoever you are in a friendship or a relationship with is meant to grow you as a person, grow your abilities to be a good person and to contribute to your community. And so even in the moments where we maybe fall short or make mistakes, I think it is amazing to honor that because you're in the journey. You're on your way to figuring out what that boundary will be in the near future and learning how to show up as a respectful partner in the future. And so there might be a couple of missteps here, there, and somewhere else. But that's why it's important to invest in your relationships, surround yourself with people who truly care about you and want the best for you and are willing to step aside if they are in the way of that best journey. So it's always food for thought. It's always good to kind of share some insight. And I'm just glad that you invited me to do so today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Kim, for being on this podcast and for just, summing everything up so beautifully. I think that consent can sometimes really feel weird and new to speak about because the way that we have to speak about communication is so formal because it has to be so generalized because it's so specific for each individual. Mm-hmm. And so consent can kind of sometimes be tricky, but through wonderful analogies that you use and different acronyms, like it was so easy. I mean, I could think of like 5 more examples of ways that I use consent and practices in my daily life just from hearing you talk about it and explain it. So thank you so much for summing it up so beautifully.
Well, thank you, Belle.
Yeah, of course. Resources will be linked as always in the description. Please, please, please reach out. I know that in this episode we talked about boundaries and consent and about how they can be violated in some really extreme ways or even non-extreme ways. And there are resources to help you with both situations. So those will be linked and more information about everything in this episode will be down there. Thank you guys. Thank you for listening.